All right, welcome folks. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. My name is Brittany. A lot of people call me Smash. I will respond to either. And I am the Congregational Engagement Manager at the Night Ministry. And tonight we are joined by our friends at ONE Northside to talk about the fair tax. And we're really trying to lean more into advocacy for congregations and faith communities at the Night Ministry because you all do awesome work in supporting us and helping us serve our clients. But we also want to help provide you with the resources that you need to work on those systemic issues that really affect our clients in a multitude of ways. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll have my colleague Ted introduce himself now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ted Peso, and I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Night Ministry.
Anna and Tess from ONE Northside, will you introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, my name is Anna. I'm the Economic Justice Organizer at ONE Northside, of which the Night Ministry is a member institution. And I'm the main organizer on the Fair Tax campaign, doing that work there. Pass to Tess.
Hello, I am Tess. I am an intern at ONE Northside. I'm currently an undergraduate student at Loyola University Chicago, and I'm focusing on economic justice and specifically within the fair tax itself. So thank you for having us tonight.
And our friend Mary is here as well from Pilgrim Oak Park. Shout out to Pilgrim Oak Park. Appreciate y'all always showing up and showing out for advocacy and justice. And we're going to start this evening with a presentation from ONE Northside about what the fair tax is. They have a lot of awesome information to share. And then Ted is going to talk a bit about why it is important to us at the Night Ministry that folks vote yes on the fair tax, about why it is important for us as an institution, but also for our clients as well. So Anna and Tess, feel free to take it away. You should have screen sharing capability.
Awesome, thank you. Well, Tess is going to do the bulk of presenting on the fair tax, but I did want to just share a few sentences about ONE Northside, just the work that we do and how it connects to the Night Ministry, if you're not familiar with ONE Northside. But we are a community organizing organization. We are based in Uptown, but we work across the North Side. And we're focused on grassroots organizing on issues of racial, social, and economic justice. So we work at the city level, we work at the state level, and some of our campaigns are at the federal level, lobbying elected officials, talking to voters to change our systems to promote more justice. So thanks to the Night Ministry for having us here. They've been a dedicated partner of ours for a long time. So we're excited to be with you in this presentation. So I'll pass to Tess. Maybe I'll just quickly give an overview too of what we're going to cover with this, and then we can get right into it. But we're going to start just by doing a short kind of interactive activity to set the stage, providing some context about the economic system that we have in Illinois already. So what our state budget looks like, how it affects us, where we compare in terms of those issues compared to other states. So we'll do that, and then we'll dive straight into our tax system, what we have now, how the fair tax would change that, how it would impact us. And then later on, we will just talk about how we actually get it passed and what you can do to support that effort. So with that, I will pass it to Tess, who's going to take us through that first activity. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for this piece.
All right, hello folks. So this is going to be a little bit of fill in the blank. So for everyone who's watching at home, if you have a pen and paper and you want to record your answers, this would be a great time to do that. And for our folks who are here with us tonight, if you want to guess, please unmute yourself and give us an answer that you think would fill in the blank. We'll have a few of these. So let's go. So Illinois has the blank largest economy in the US. Do you have any guesses?
I would say it has to be like at least top 10 since we have the third largest city in the country, but I don't know for sure.
That's good. That's pretty good. Anyone else want to throw an answer out there?
The fifth?
Okay, someone looked at the slide. But yeah, no, we have the fifth largest economy in all the states. So then next, Illinois then ranks blank in the nation for spending on mental health services per capita. So being that we've got the fifth largest economy, where do you think we land?
I'm guessing it's gone down. Maybe we used to be higher.
Okay. So unfortunately, we rank 36th. So yeah, not the best percentile there. And then for Illinois ranks blank in the nation for equity in school funding.
15th.
15th, okay. An optimistic guess, okay.
I know it's worse because we rely on local taxes really heavily.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, you're right on the money there. We are 50th.
Whoa.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And then next is Illinois spends blank amount for low income students for every dollar spent on non-low income students. This is what your tax dollars are currently going to.
75 cents.
Yeah, pretty close. 78. But still not matched and still not above. And then Illinois has the blank most regressive tax system currently.
10th.
Again, pretty close. The 8th. So you might be asking yourself right now at home, what is a regressive tax system? And that is one of the big questions that we'll be answering tonight. Does anyone know on the call tonight what a regressive tax system is?
A tax system that makes low-income folks pay more taxes than the most wealthy folks in our state.
Yes, exactly. And so with all this information that we've now given you, just a brief insight, are you surprised? What do you think about this? Is this something that you definitely saw? Is this something that you didn't think that we would have, being that we have one of the largest cities in our state?
I mean, it doesn't surprise me very much, just having done budget advocacy in Springfield for, over 10 years with the night ministry, and seeing kind of the lack of growth in funding for services and how much we have to fight for services and the unpredictability in service funding, which I'll be able to talk about a little bit later, but it doesn't surprise me being on the ground.
I'm kind of embarrassed. I mean, I'm fairly new to Chicago and to Illinois in general, and you kind of get this picture of like, oh, we're this progressive state. We care about the rights of low-income folks. We want everyone to have equity and all of that jazz. So I'm kind of surprised and embarrassed by that.
I'm not surprised because it's mostly the Chicago area, I think, that is more liberal, and a lot of conservatives outstate, and just the funding in Chicago is so bad for low-income people.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That's an unfortunate truth, but that's part of the reason why we're here tonight, is to talk about a potential solution. Back into the slides. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. So looking at all the states around us, Illinois has a flat tax. Unlike Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, we currently tax our income at a flat level. And so this does not differ for high income earners, low income earners. Everyone is taxed at the same rate of 4.95%. And so this doesn't matter if you're making millions a year or if you're making minimum wage. And so we're only one of 9 states in the US today that have this flat tax. Even the federal government has a progressive tax. And so, as you can see, and as we saw with the numbers that we just ran through, this harms low income folks disproportionately. And so, as we see, 5% of your income hits a lot harder when your income is not as generous. Seeing now at this graph, with all of the taxes that are currently being paid in the state, we see that the lowest 20% are paying so much more than the top 1%. So take some time to digest this at home, take some time to watch this. But does this graph make sense to y'all? Do you see something that you don't quite agree with on it?
Yeah, I mean, the percentage of someone's income at a lower income, it leaves them with less money to spend on the essential needs that somebody has. So things like housing, things like food, things like healthcare, basic necessities, basic hygiene products. Then, you know, higher income residents of the state. And it really shows the impact that tax credits and things like that have on wealthy individuals. So we make so many, we give tax breaks to so many wealthy individuals that it kind of creates this income inequality across the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you look at this graph, oh yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
Does this mean that in dollars, say there was $100, the lowest would pay $20, second would pay $20, and the highest making with the highest income would only pay $1 of the way you've got this written out, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. So does that mean out of all the money, the lowest, totaling up the lowest incomes, they pay the same amount of dollars as the second lowest incomes, the middle incomes, the fourth incomes, but much more than in dollars, not in percent, in dollars total. Is that correct?
Yes. The 20% measurement down there is saying like how much of the tax revenue is coming from these people, or the percentage of the population. The 14% that you see is out of the total income. So if each of these families, let's say, we're bringing in $100 of income, lowest 20% of our economy is giving 14.4 of that $100 back to the state. And the top 1% who already has wealth and is already making that, out of that $100, they're only giving 7.4 of it. But yeah, Anna has more information on that.
No, that's a great explanation. Yeah, one thing I want to just point out about this graph, so this is displaying the full picture of taxes in our state. So we're here talking about the income tax, but there are a host of taxes you pay. We all know this, we live in our state. So the sales tax, the bag tax, property taxes, the tax on water, tax if you go to Six Flags, you know, all these taxes that we pay. So this graph is displaying how that affects different income brackets in our state. So I think as Tess said, you know, the lowest income bracket here is just paying significantly higher percentage of their income in taxes, compared to the top 1% paying a relatively low percentage of their income in taxes, and that group being the one who can most afford to pay. So this graph is meant to illustrate what we talked about and what you said, Brittany, about a regressive system. So low income people are paying proportionally more of their income in taxes than high income people.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the main things that we're highlighting is those who can afford it the most are paying the least. So that's what happens with the current tax system that we have in place. And then with that, how have you all been feeling budget cuts within your communities? Have you seen budget cuts? Have you personally been impacted by it? Have you seen this social services closing or underfunding of schools impact you, loved ones, or other people in your community?
I would say that in social services, we've seen We've seen, the last several years have been really difficult for the social service sector in Illinois. There's still, people are still coming back from the budget crisis that happened several years ago, and so services are still restoring themselves. And I would venture to say that there are sections of our state which are still feeling that even worse than Chicago, right? There are pieces of our state where there are no services for homeless youth, for example. Whereas in some parts of the state, we have multiple programs, and some huge swaths of the state, there are no programs, right? There are no state-funded programs for homeless youth.
Oftentimes, populations who aren't receiving this are the ones who need it the most. Has anyone else felt anything or seen anything directly in their community here in Chicago or other places around Illinois?
I'm just thinking about the cuts for mental health and mental health centers here in Chicago. I'm not sure how directly linked that is to state funding, but I know that's been a really big deal for access to mental health care here in Chicago.
And I think when you look at our city budget, I mean, Anna can probably talk about this. When you look at our city budget, the city budget has had to respond to the lack of state funding availability, right? So we've had to increase taxes in the city to make up for some of those deficits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one challenge there is the lack of revenue coming in from the state, and the other is a lot of cities, even Midwestern cities like St. Louis, have a city income tax as well. And part of the problem here in Illinois is that in our Constitution, again, it disallows us from having a graduated income tax at the state level, but also for cities to do that. So if the fair tax were passed and we amended the Constitution, the city could also start to raise some revenue through that method as well, instead of increasing parking tickets and fees and all of those things.
I think that's a great transition then into the solution, and that is the fair tax. Looking at what is going to be on the ballot in November, this current proposal that will be voted on is simply asking whether or not we want to amend the Constitution to allow for a fair graduated tax. The fair tax means actually lower taxes for lower income earners as well as middle and working class income earners. So as you see here, 97% of people would actually see themselves paying less in taxes, and only those who are making more than the $250,000 will actually be paying that higher tax rate. And if you want to take a minute to look at the graph next to it and see if you have any questions about it. Again, these are a lot of numbers, and these are a lot of different levels of numbers. So ultimately, this would bring together $3.4 billion into our state each year. This wouldn't just be a first initial draw in. This would be something that we could expect after every year.
What's the percentage right now? The regular that everybody pays right now, the percent?
That's 4.95. So unless you're making within that bracket of what was that, $250,000 and $1 up to $500,000 a year, you would see a rise in your income tax. But as long as you're within that six figures to $250,000, you would not see a rise. And anything below that would actually see a sizable drop. And so if passed, this money would, again, be brought into the state each year. And on top of that as well, one of the things I want to highlight is the fact that these are marginal rates. So if you're making that extra $1,000 over the $250,000, you'd only be paying a higher rate on that $1,000 more. You wouldn't be paying the rate on the bulk sum unless you were bringing in more than $1 million in income. And so at that point, it's a little bit different of a conversation. But for those incomes that are, worried about, okay, if we make an extra $1,000, we're going to be jumping our income tax by 3%. No, you won't. You'll be jumping the 3% on those extra $1,000, $2,000. But unless you're making over $1 million, you won't see that taxed on the whole sum. And so, yeah, altogether, this will bring 3.4 billion questions. So I also want to recognize the fact that I've thrown a lot of numbers at you, thrown a lot of information at you. Do you have any questions? Is there anything I can clarify or say?
Somebody questioned me about this, and they said somebody told them that now, because of this, if this went through, that retirement income would be taxed. Not true?
No, that's one of the things that would be great about this tax going through, is that if it doesn't go through, pensions and other forms of retirement income would be taxed, because with this revenue coming in, this 3.4 billion would help fund public projects and get the state out of debt. So those and very important incomes would not be taxed or burdened by the current system.
And I was actually doing some research on that topic today, actually. And I was reading some of the opposition to the fair tax and some of what the groups who are opposing the fair tax believe should be done with Illinois' system. And there are several of the groups that are actually opposing the tax. When you read through their economic plans that they've submitted over the last year, actually include removing the exemption against taxing income or retirement income. So and creating a retirement tax. So it's been really interesting to see the commercials come out talking about retirement taxes when some of the opposition actually includes retirement taxes in their plans.
That's an amazing point, Ted. I'll just jump on that bandwagon to say a lot of those groups too have also advocated for cuts to services, which we know would impact senior services. So I think they pretend to be an ally to seniors when it's prudent for them, but their track record does not actually show that. We actually have a few, we want to highlight a couple FAQ about the fair tax. One of them was about retirement income. So I'll keep the slides up and just show these questions up here. But I think, as was mentioned, we're seeing a lot of attack ads come out. So want to make sure that you all feel equipped to respond to some of those points that are being made. So I'm going to quickly run through those up here. So the first one is something we're hearing a lot is, does this open the door to more tax increases? And what we stressed about the graduated tax is this doesn't give Springfield any more power than it already has to raise taxes. If they wanted to, they could raise the flat tax right now. In fact, they have raised the flat tax over the past 10 years. So this just allows Springfield the flexibility to raise taxes based on income bracket, but doesn't give them any more power than they already have right now. And we also add to, raising taxes on the middle class. This has been a point brought up by opposition meant to fearmonger. And the states that have moved to a graduated income tax, we have not seen then massive increases in taxes on the middle class. That is a politically unpopular thing to do. It does not raise substantial revenue. It is not smart policy. When we hear the opposition saying that that might happen, we can really look to other states and see that that is not what has happened. Another question that we get a lot of the time is, where will the money go? So the money will go into the general fund, the Illinois General Fund. And the distribution of the general fund is decided through Springfield's budget process. So that involves the governor advising and then both legislative chambers voting to pass a budget. That happens in May of every year. So we know that once the fair tax passes, our work isn't done. We're going to continue, as I'll speak for ONE Northside, as we have for many years, working down in Springfield to make sure that the money in the budget is going towards the services that we need in our communities. So we're going to continue to do that work, certainly. But We do have somewhat of a preview of where that money would go. In February of this year, Governor Pritzker released a proposal for how he would like to see the money spent. Again, with the caveat that would have to go through the House and Senate. But it did include substantial increases to K through 12 education, higher ed, and social services. Specifically, DCFS got a funding increase. So a lot has changed since COVID. We're looking at much higher deficits next year. We're experiencing a recession. There's going to be revenue shortfalls. So the balance is going to change for sure. But at the least, we know that we have somewhat of a preview, at least, of how the governor would push the chambers to spend that money. And then finally, without the fair tax, we won't have the chance to fight for those funding increases. So we want to give ourselves the chance to do that. And again, knowing, especially with these revenue shortfalls, that without it, we could be facing inevitable cuts or an increase to the flat tax. One question we also get a lot of the time on the phones from voters: will the wealthy leave the state? So want to just sort of, pull back the curtain on this question, that research, other states, studies do not show correlation between a high income tax and the likelihood of mass exodus of wealthy people or corporations from the state. As Tess brought up, many of our neighboring states already have a graduated tax. Many of those states have even a higher rate than what's being proposed in Illinois. And if we look at thriving states such as California, or even locally Minnesota, who have some of the highest income tax rates in the country, also have, the highest numbers of wealthy people. So in terms of just fearing that this could cause business or wealthy people to leave the state, just the data doesn't really show that. We're not saying, certainly some wealthy people probably will leave, but in terms of fearing what this could do to Illinois' economy, it's really not something that we need to be fearing with the passage of a graduated tax. Moving towards the end here, will this harm small businesses? So this is not a tax on small businesses. This is a tax on personal income. I will add that the rate structure includes an increase to corporate taxes. So that is an increase from 7 to 7.99%. But the corporate tax will affect large corporations only, who, again, can afford to pay more. It will not affect small businesses. So a small business would only be affected insofar as the personal income of the small business owner. So if a small business owner is making more than $250,000 a year in personal income, they will pay more, but every other small business owner will pay less. And the numbers on that cut actually the same way as they do for the larger Illinois population. So 97% of small business owners are not making more than that 250,000 threshold. So they'll actually see a benefit with the fair tax. The final question here was just the retirement question. So I think we covered that. But yeah, Illinois doesn't currently tax retirement earnings. Nothing about passing the fair tax will change that. And then I think, as Ted raised here, we have some points up here about just, where the supporters and the opposers of the fair tax actually lie on the question of retirement income and funding for senior services. And do want to note too that the AARP did endorse the fair tax. So I think that's important to raise too for folks who are wondering about this retirement income tax question. That's what we've got for FAQ. If there are any other opposition points or questions people have, you definitely feel free to raise them right now. I'll stop screen sharing. Yeah, and if not, I think we're gonna move next to talk a little bit about, I'll pass it to Ted, who's gonna talk a little bit about why this is important to the Knight Ministry, now that we've kind of gone through what the fair tax is.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. So yeah, the Night Ministry is an endorser of the fair tax. Through our work with ONE Northside, we've trained our staff on this. We've been talking to our young people. Our associate board members are getting some training about the fair tax this week as well. And so it's really clear that to us that Illinois needs to reform its tax structure for a lot of the inequality reasons that we've heard about today. We know that the current tax structure in Illinois causes increasing income inequality between the top 1% and the bottom 20% of our country. You saw that graph about the percentage of income, but it really also impacts the amount of income, right? So before accounting for taxes in Illinois, the top 1% have 137 times more income than families in the bottom 20%. And after taxes, that actually grows to 149%. So our tax structure in Illinois actually increases the income inequality between members of our community, which makes it even more harmful than it typically would be. As many of you know, at the Night Ministry, we provide housing, healthcare, and human connection to youth and adults who are experiencing homelessness and poverty. So I want to talk a little bit about our services and how this could impact not only our services, but also folks across the state. So it's pretty clear if you look at the governor's budget for the current fiscal year that we cannot continue to fund human services without an increase in revenue. The governor said that. He's put forward 2 different budgets showing, you know, what the impact of fair tax could have on the budget, and we're really at a point where we cannot consider what cuts would look like, right? So when we think about this, I think about the fact that in 2019, across our state, about 30,000 people were turned away from shelter in Illinois. And so there is definitely a need for shelter services in Illinois. And then when we look at the grants that we've received from the states, they really haven't grown very much. So the Night Ministry, we received 1 state grant for our youth shelter programs. I took a look at that over time, and our grant over the last 10 years has grown about 9%. The issue with that is that the cost of doing business has increased more than that, right? So every year you pay more for rent, you pay more for supplies, you pay more for staff, especially as the state and the city have increased minimum wage, which is wonderful, but there's a cost to that. So while our grant over the last 9 years has, or the last 10 years has increased about 9%, Illinois' minimum wage has gone up 16%, right? So if the state wants to provide fair grants to grantees in human services, they're going to have to raise more revenue, and this is one way that they could do that, right? Let's look at schools. So in the 2008-2009 school year across Illinois, there were 27,000 homeless families identified in the school system in our state. During that year, the state of Illinois gave out $3 million to 36 school districts to provide educational support for those homeless students. Now today, we're double that number. We're over 56,000 families experiencing homelessness in Illinois schools. And the state doesn't give any money to those school districts to provide specialized services for homeless students. So there's definitely needs that are going unmet. We also talked about income inequality and education funding equity issues. So if local school districts got more money from the state and were able to reduce their reliance on property taxes, that it could be a direct effect on rent, making rent cheaper and making the rental market more accessible by people that we serve. Another big thing that we do is healthcare. So our buses out on the streets every night providing healthcare, free healthcare to folks on the street. The model we use on the streets and encampments that our street medicine team uses, it's called free and charitable clinics, right? So we don't charge anything to folks for our services. In some states like Iowa, which has a graduated income tax, has a dedicated funding line for free and charitable clinics. So clinics like the Night Ministry in Iowa can access state funding to pay for their services. So that's important to the bottom line, right? It's important to the organization's bottom line having that funding, but it's also important to the services that people receive. And one way we see that is in vaccines, right? So we're currently in a pandemic, it's currently flu season. when you're not funded by the state, they don't offer you vaccines readily, right? So a lot of times we have to go to medical schools or medical teaching hospitals and access vaccines from those providers. So really, we're in this fight for vaccines, which if we were funded by the state and at that table, we'd be able to access services that our clients need on the street, right? So those are some of the thoughts that we had about how this could impact our services and the folks that we serve. Are there any questions? Great.
Thanks,
Thank
Steph,
you.
for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, you all have the on the ground understanding of what it's like to work in social services, but I just can't imagine the instability agency experience with the fluctuations in state funding and never really being able to plan far ahead into the future. And just imagining what the stability of funding streams could do in terms of quality of services and experience for staff and all of that.
Yeah, and a lot of times we talk about the fact that stable funding is great. Like, you want stable funding, but when your costs are increasing, stable funding is actually a funding cut, right? And so we want a state funding system that increases grants along with the cost of living and increases grants with the cost of minimum wage, so that we can provide these services and keep them at a level that they need to be at, right? So
Yes, increasing
yes.
would be the goal. Well, we're going to close out just by sharing the ballot language and how it actually gets passed. I'm going to share my screen again. So yeah, I do want to just take a step back to share that One Northside and many groups across the state, senators, House of Representatives, labor unions, have been fighting for the fair tax for many years. Taken lots of lobbying work. It's taken lots of protesting out in the streets just to get to this point. So to amend the Constitution, two things need to happen. One is that the House and the Senate need to vote by a supermajority to amend the Constitution. So that's 3/5 voting to amend it, which happened last year in May of 2019. So that's done. The second step is that voters need to okay the amendment. So that's what we're talking about in terms of the ballot this November. So the amendment will pass either if 50% plus one of all voters voting in the election vote yes on the question, or if 60% plus one of all voters voting on the question vote yes. There are these two avenues, is just because some people will skip the question, not everyone will vote on the question. But if either of these checkboxes are, then the amendment goes into effect. One thing I want to make clear is that voters are not voting on the tax rates themselves. So in May of last year, after the House and Senate voted to pass the amendment, they passed another bill that included the rate structure, essentially saying if voters okay the amendment, then these are the tax rates that will go into effect in January of 2021. So what we're voting on is whether we want to amend the Constitution to allow the state to have a graduated income tax, not those specific rates that were mentioned. So what you will see on your ballot, and it's at the top above the presidential question. So that's where you can look out for it. And what you'll see is this long paragraph. I'm not going to read it out loud. We could definitely provide it afterwards, but just the thing to know is the words fair tax or even graduated income tax are not in the ballot language. It's technical language about amending our Constitution, but the key is to vote yes. So if you're in support of the fair tax, vote yes on the question, but this is what you will see in your ballot. And I just want to share a bit about what One Northside is doing with our work with the Vote Yes for Fair Tax Coalition. So we're working on the North Side, but we need much more than the North Side in order to win. So we're working with this coalition called Vote Yes for Fair Tax. We're made up of nearly 80 groups that are working across the state to talk to voters educate them about the issue, and get voters to pledge to vote yes. So as One Northside, we've taken on the goal of talking to as many voters as it takes to get 3,200 pledges to vote yes. We're about at 2,500 right now, so the goal is within reach. We're excited to be so close, and we do have 5 weeks left until the election. So our entire campaign is shaped around getting those pledges. So if you're looking to get involved in the work that we're doing, first and foremost, we'd ask you to sign the pledge. So the link is up here. You can also go ahead and post it in the chat, or maybe Tess can post it in the chat. That would be awesome. And then also, if you want to go ahead and share that with your network, especially with our congregational partners, we're asking them to put it in their newsletter, put it in your church bulletin, put it in the chat during services. There's a number of ways to also spread that pledge. And it takes 30 seconds to fill out. It's super fast. And if, as an individual, you're looking to support the campaign, we're also doing all of the usual voter contact things, like phone banking, text banking. We're socially distanced, masked street canvassing at farmers markets, specifically on the north side, nearly every day of the week. So if that's something that you're interested in, we have a sign up form. Again, the link is up here. And then again, specifically for congregations, some of our congregational partners created an amazing guide for clergy to how to preach on this issue, how to connect texts to the fair tax and the issue of economic justice, which is a really powerful way to get in front of voters with a credible messenger about why they should support the fair tax. And obviously this list is not exhaustive. There are many other ways to support the fair tax, even just talking to your friends, family, neighbors, people in your personal networks who you know are voters in Illinois, asking them to vote yes. So that's the work that we're doing. We hope you will be a part of it. And that's all we have in terms of our presentation. I'll go ahead and drop those links in the chat right now. Oh, Tess did it. Awesome. But yeah,
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to urge everyone really to remind folks that democracy isn't really a spectator sport, right? So don't make your voting decision on this amendment based on a commercial you saw on TV or something you saw on your parents' Facebook page. The information is super easy to find, and the opposition is really well funded. So you can find out the information about this ballot measure, the accurate information. You can find it all out online pretty easily. And so really think about this, have discussions with your friends about it, and think about the impact this could have on the most vulnerable people in our state, and really vote your values with this. So.
Thanks, Ted. Yeah, and for folks out there, congregations or otherwise, if you want more resources, please reach out to us. You can respond to either the email or the post that you saw this in. And I'm happy as well to connect with faith communities with more resources about how to talk about this within your faith tradition, whether that's in worship or small group discussions. I'm happy to help provide those resources and be a part of those conversations. Thanks so much, Anna and Tess, for providing us with all of that really helpful information. Thanks, Ted, for talking about what this means to the night ministry and our clients. And thank you, Mary, for being a part of this conversation and having some helpful feedback and questions. We really appreciate everyone for tuning in. Just vote yes on the fair tax. And if you want to get connected to One Northside, we at the Night Ministry can also help connect you in that way as well.